So first, thank you everyone for joining the webinar, the ALAMOD webinar. It start a bit, so just a bit of context. Most of you know what the ALAMOD project is about, but one of the work package is to improve the connections between the different models that are developed in France. And regarding the crop, obviously, sticks is a very key crop model developed by the French community. And then in Orchidea, we have a collaboration with the Sticks group for a while, but we are like starting again a process to incorporate some of the key crop management features into the trunk version of Orchidea. We also have an Orchidea crop version that is a bit in parallel, but so that's a bit the aim of the webinar today, to show a bit where we are in the two models and then discuss what kind of collaboration we may have in the future. So I don't know, maybe Philippe, you want to start?
Yes. So basically, just to say how we will do for Orchidea, I will do an overall brief presentation. There are many slides, but just to keep, because we will share these transparency so that you keep for the Sticks people to see what is done in Orchidea. And then I guess the two Nicolas, I don't know how it will work between Nicolas Viovi and Nicolas Vichard, who will present more specifically the Orchidea Sticks initiatives. So maybe I easily start to share my screen. We have a Google Slide documents that makes it maybe easy to share later on. So do you see my screen? Sorry,
Yes, perfectly.
sorry. Okay. So check the time. Yeah. So as you all know, the Orchidea is the global land surface model of the IPSL, but now it starts to be more of a community model developed also by different groups across France, not only the IPSL in Paris, and also with other institutes like in the Netherlands or abroad. It's the land surface model component of the IPSL Earth system model. And one key feature is that it can go from site level to global application. So that's really a key important things of Orchidea. We can do site level simulation with no real specific spatial scale, but we usually work at the plot scales of not an individual tree, but more a small ecosystem, typical footprint of a flux tower. Then, so the model solves for the energy, the water, carbon, recently nitrogen budget, and I will also mention later a version that also include the phosphorus cycle. So it's really all these interactive budgets that are thought together. So
C'était mal barré.
sorry, we hear someone.
Oh putain, c'est en anglais.
Pour le moral des troupes. Qu'est-ce que t'as?
Un
Sorry.
webinaire qui m'intéressait, c'est en
Vous pouvez
anglais.
couper vos micros, s'il vous plaît.
Yes.
Il y a des micros qui restent là.
Yeah. Sorry. So I continue. So basically, so as I said, so we solve for all these energy, water, and nutrient cycle. And typically, the model has different time steps. It's an important feature where it resolves the diurnal cycle with a time step roughly on the order of 15 minutes, and with all the physical processes, but also the carbon fluxes, the photosynthesis are resolved also at this fast time step. And there is another daily time step where you have more allocation processes or slower processes. And we also have a yearly time step to update maps of vegetation cover or large-scale vegetation dynamics. So that's the key important things. And we use only from the atmospheric observation, temperature, wind, precipitation, relative humidity, CO2 and concentration as the input of Orchidea, plus some other input like the description of the plant functional types in each grid cell. And we calculate in returns state variables as energy, carbon, water stocks, and the fluxes between the different reservoirs, and especially the fluxes with the atmosphere. So that's the key thing. One other key things of Orchidea is based for the photosynthesis, because it's a tight link with also what is done in sticks, is we calculate the photosynthesis from the leaf to the canopy. We discretize the canopy in different vertical layers, and in each layer, we calculate following the formalism, the Farquhar et al. Formalism, Boleberry stomatol conductance, and this has been now enriched with the nitrogen cycle, so which slightly complicates the formalism. But we calculate the photosynthesis for each level, and we integrate then over the whole canopy to derive the overall photosynthesis, overall transpiration, and we also do compute an energy budget for the grid box. There is an important aspect linked to the hydrological cycle, which was initially the route with the energy and water budget. So we calculate a full water cycle budget. And the key things is we have, it's not really described here, we have a multi-layer soil water budget with 11 layers, and the diffusions of water result from the Richards equations. And so we do calculate also interceptions of water in the canopy, interception lost, bare soil evaporation, and all the different terms. And of course, we have the snow impact, and we have a model with several snow layers that are on the top of the vegetation accounted for. We do calculate runoff, drainage, and all the runoff and drainage then flows into a so-called routing scheme that transport water and allows inundation, plan of the inundations and river discharge to the ocean, and with the possibility also to transport nutriment, which is an ongoing feature that is currently being developed with DOC, DIC, and different elements that can be transported by the rivers. And we also, I do mention that, we do have ongoing developments to compute the recharge from the groundwaters into these active water layers of the surface. I will mention, although the focus is today on crops, we have specificities with respect to forest, and we have included so-called demography of the forest with some, we have for each forest type, we have diameter and age classes. So we have class of diameter and class of age, and we do account for recruitment. And we do try now to account for a more process-based mortality process. And this also is linked to relatively recent developments to account for the extension of light within the canopy following a two-stream radiative transfer with backscatter between the layers. It was developed by Bernard Penty. We have, of course, a dynamic LAI, which applies to all plant functional type and not only forest. And I do mention also an hydraulic architecture to calculate water potential in the plants that will be generalized, and that we first have applied to forest more specifically, but it also applies to cropland and grassland. So for the mortality, I just wanted to mention that we are trying to work on process-based mortality with cascade of mortality due to windfall, bark beetles, and fire. So we have all these processes embedded in the models to account for abrupt mortality. But that's not the specific focus of today. We should not forget the soil. So Bertrand is more piloting these parts, and where we have a discretized versions of the soil decomposition that still follow the century model with active, slow, and passive layer that are now combined with the nitrogen cycle with the equivalent decomposition of nitrogen. And this is now discretized with for the different soil layers. So this complex scheme is always under evolutions and centralized by Bertrand. I do want to mention that we do treat the nutrient cycle. There was a first implementation again in our trunk version of Orchidea from an initial development by Zonke-Zahler. So this was done more recently by Nicolas Vuchard to include the nitrogen cycle and its impact on the carbon cycle. Here, I just wanted to show that in a recent PhD, we have investigated with Nicolas the contribution of CO2 fertilization versus nitrogen depositions on the cumulative uptake of carbon by the land ecosystem as following different regions. So we see that the nitrogen cycle is important. I should not mention and not forget also that there is a version that includes also on the top of the nitrogen the phosphorus cycle, and this version has been developed by Daniel Goll, who is also connected, and there is an ongoing effort to bring back that version, this phosphorus cycle, coupled to the nitrogen cycle and the carbon cycle, back into our main version trunk of Orchidea. Not to forget that we do treat, and we have Juliette Latier is taking care of all the chemical and emissions, chemical cycle with volatile organic compounds that are emitted by the vegetation. There is an effort on the methane with wetlands and also on nitrogen oxides. And with that maybe Nicolas will mention a bit more in the descriptions of the Orchidea sticks links. I want to mention a specific things that may also interest people working on sticks. We have, and we are starting to develop a so-called multi-layer scheme where basically, for those who know, there's only a few models where you would treat the turbulence within the canopy. It can be a forest or a cropland, and that would mean we would have an energy budget for different vertical layer in the canopy, and possibly a different vapor pressure deficit, a different temperature that would control the exchange of carbon and water and energy for each layer. So that's an important thing for us, because this multi-layer energy budget allows us to calculate gradient more in forests where we do observe temperature gradient between the top of the canopy and the ground floor, which are important for questions of biodiversity. But this may be also relevant for crops and especially dense crop with large LAI. I do want to mention, to conclude, that we have a lot of biophysical and biogeochemical mature developments that we are starting to integrate again in our trunk versions, because typically a development starts from the trunk at one stage, makes its own development for 1 or 2 years, and then the issue is to bring them back, and this will be detailed for crop just afterwards. But here you can find a list of some of these developments that are being incorporated back. And last but not least, we have attached to Orchidea a so-called data assimilation system. We are working a lot on that, which help us basically to optimize the key parameters of Orchidea using following the Bayes theorem and probabilistic theory. So this is a system that allows to fuse a lot of existing observation in situ or satellite to calibrate the parameters of Orchidea. So we have a scheme attached to that. So maybe now I stop, or you want me to push the slide, Nicola? How do you want, or to share yourself?
No, I think they are just in the same.
Yeah, they are just
Sure, we
following.
can
So
see
if you want, you can say, and I push the slides, or you take.
Ok.
Je laisse y aller, Nicolas, parce que comme c'est toi qui as mis le plus de transparence, ça sera peut-être plus simple.
Ok. N'hésite pas à m'interrompre.
Oui, pas de souci.
Okay. So, wait, now I will present some work we had for a long time about crop, representation of crop into orchidee, and especially about the crop phenology. So it's work, I think you can go to the next slide. So actually it's a work that has been initiated a long time ago, nearly 20 years ago. First, in the framework of the PhD thesis of Sébastien Gerrois, that was coordinated by Nathalie Denoblé, and also from the INRA side, Nadine Brisson and Bernard Seguin. And typically, the first attempt was really to be focused on the crop phenology and its impact on the water and carbon budget. And so, the first attempt was really to assimilate the LAI from sticks. And so it was done in a framework in which both orchidee and sticks were running in parallel. So at running time, sticks was provided its LAI to orchidee. So next slide, if you want, Philippe. Thanks. So typically that kind of framework we could have. I think you can move to the next slide as well. So typically, in the first work we did, we target 3 main crops that were represented into sticks that we thought was quite relevant to account in the coupling at global scale. So we represent wheat, maize, and soybean as the key 3 main crops representative of the all crops.
Ça t'intéresse, orchidée et tous les trucs de modélisation du type ou pas?
Ah, c'est les.
Il y a quelqu'un qui a un micro pas coupé.
And so to precise, it has been always a one-way coupling. So it was a really assimilation of the LAI and other variable like shoot-root ratio from sticks into orchidee. There is no orchidee information that was transmitted to sticks. And with this framework that we call orchidee sticks at that time, so we had several studies and several PhD that has been done. So the one of Sébastien Gerrois, the one of I forgot her first name.
Pascal.
Smith. And other studies, so postdoc long weekly. So site studies, regional ones, and also studies that focus on new parameterization. Typically, in the framework of the PhD studies of Haute Valade, we aim to add the parameterization for sugarcane into orchidee sticks. You can go to the next slide, Philippe. And so this is just an illustration of one results from the thesis of Pascal Smith that aim to represent the impact of accounting for a better crop phenology into orchidee when analyzing the impact of the 2003 heat wave on the carbon budget. And so it showed that typically, while in the standard orchidee, we had quite a long period, vegetative period. Indeed, with this default orchidee model, we aim to account for a higher impact on the carbon budget due to the heat wave than when we account for a phenology that was stopping, let's say, around in July for some crops. And so, that was what we model with orchidee sticks. Next slide, Philippe. Based on the different work, maybe 10 years after the initiation of this coupling, orchidea with sticks, what we analyzed was that this online coupling was a bit challenging to use and also to maintain on our supercomputing resource. That indeed, one motivation to do this really online coupling was the capacity to possibly update the sticks model with new version, and that indeed, after 10 years, it's a functionality, an option that we never used. And conceptually, indeed, while having these two models running in parallel, there are some redundancy in the way we represent some processes that were indeed done twice, once in orchidea and once in sticks. Typically, that's what happened for the water budget. There were two water budgets in the two models, and we thought that was not really so relevant to do so. So then from that, we change our view a bit and say, well, maybe it will be more efficient and more relevant to embed some crop functionality from sticks directly into orchidea. So you can move to the next slide, Philippe. And that's what we work to with the development of a new version that, in that case, we call orchidea crop. So it's still based on the sticks functionality, but in that version, we aim to isolate the routine specifically from sticks that we wanted to make use into orchidea, and we plug them and we add them into the orchidea framework. So it was initially a work done by Xu Shenwu, the postdoc at LSE. And this first paper has been published in GMD in 2016. And typically, well, if we go a bit more in detail, so the routing were dedicated to crop development stages, crop leaf growth, and crop heal were the ones from sticks that we used into this orchidea crop version. Next slide, Phil. So this is just as an illustration, some results that Xu Shen published in the GMD paper that were focusing on some fluxnet sites over Europe, both for maize and wheat, and we evaluated against LAI and other variables such as GPP, which is shown on the panels below here. Next slide, Philippe. So another comparison about yield. Oh, no, sorry, this is for GPP, annual GPP mean annual GPP as a scatter plot, model versus observed GPP. And next slide. So typically with this orchidea crop version, we have different work that has been done. Some work aimed to add new parameterization. So typically that was part of the PhD of Xu Wang that worked on parameterization for rice in collaboration with Françoise Ruger. And also Xu work typically to the addition of irrigation and some multi-cropping functionality, but this was done mostly on, I will say, in the orchidea side of the orchidea crop version. So it did not change that much what we used from the sticks model into orchidea crop. And then there are other studies that we are focusing on West Africa, also participation, I think, in the framework of the ACME project, in the global gridded crop model intercomparison that was published by Muller in 2019, etc. I think that maybe Daniel may know more than I, but some work also that aim to use orchidea crop in the framework of the orchidea CNP, but I'm not pretty sure, but maybe we could precise that a bit later. Next slide, Philippe. So this is still as an illustration what of the intercomparison, model intercomparison for yield anomaly as published by Muller in GMD 2017. I think it's not so so important. And next slide, Philippe. Yeah, so this is a bit more the context of what we are working also presently in the Orchidea group. So this is still on the some site we work initially with Xuezhenwu, so European site. Just as an illustration, the sensitivity to some parameter from sticks, so typically about nitrogen stress, the way that our model were responded to this index of nitrogen stress, just to show that, well, it's, as we may assume, highly sensitive. And just to precise that so far, indeed, this Orchidea crop version was done in a version of Orchidea, sorry, in which there is no nitrogen cycle. So we were a bit simplifying the scheme and assuming that there is no that much stress related to nitrogen, apart from this setting of this parameter. Next slide, Philippe. And so one question mark, and we aim to a bit answer currently, is to update this Orchidea crop version using the present day Orchidea version we have, as mentioned by Philippe, that account now for the nitrogen cycle and the interaction between carbon and nitrogen cycles. So currently, Mojtaba Ubala, that could not be with us today, is working to this update of Orchidea crop in a recent version of Orchidea, accounting for the nitrogen cycle and its impact on the crop phenology. And so that's currently what we are working on. And in the same time, we thought that it was maybe timely also to wonder whether we should also envisage some updates regarding the sticks component, the sticks routines. We are using this Orchidea crop model. In particular, sorry, one question mark from our side was about the specialization. I should precise that so far, the sticks routine we are using come from a version that is quite old, from 2013. That was modular, but only, I would say, point scale from a computing point of view. I would say there is no vector of points. We are simply using scalar, and this is a bit not so efficient when we are using this type of coding in Orchidea crop that aim to be a global model. So typically, we have a question about that functionality that may come in the sticks group about the spatialization. I think that was all for me. No, Nicolas, maybe if you want to summarize, I'll let you. Yeah, I think that was yours, Nicolas. I don't know.
No, it was me.
Okay. So,
but I added a few points of discussion, but maybe before Nicolas, Viovi, you want to complement on what Nicolas has said about Orchidea sticks, or is it fine?
No, it's okay. Okay, I think he said everything.
And yeah, I just put here at the end.
maybe Daniel, in case just also for.
Yeah, maybe Daniel, you
if,
want to add something?
We currently have no plans to merge crop with CNP.
Okay.
I can only add that Yang Su, as a paper in review, has optimized the winter wheat yields and harvest date to a database of Germany. And it also includes a post-processing, machine learning-based a step by which you can resolve the differences in the different crop winter wheat cultivars, which otherwise is not captured by Orchidea. So it's a post-processing step to resolve the heterogeneity in yields and harvest dates, which comes from the different cultivars used in different regions in Europe.
Yes,
This
and the
paper should
object
be published very soon.
yes, and the objective of the paper was to look to the possibility to do a double cropping for wheat and maize in different places of Europe, considering different climate scenario. So it was done in the frame of the Sealand project.
And
So
here, yeah.
No, just to say that maybe we can take few questions, but then all those question marks that you added, Philippe, probably are more like point for the discussion after the presentation. So maybe we can take few questions on typically on the presentations. So please raise your hands or open the microphone if you have some question for Philippe or for Nicolas. Or the two Nicolas, actually. Okay, so
Maybe
is...
one thing that I can add, maybe for the to present this point for the discussion. So one thing that I wanted to add is that Orchidea has been labelized by the CNRS, which means it's a community code that has the support of CNRS INSU. And so in that context, we should also probably not forget to discuss formal points of collaboration between Orchidea and STIX, between INRAE and basically CNRS, CEA, and all this community code of Orchidea. So then there is the question of the update of the coupling, so that Nicolas mentioned. There's the improvement of the technical coupling, which is one thing that is key to work on. And then maybe a two-way exchange. We have used STIX, but maybe some modules of Orchidea or some developments of Orchidea may benefit to the STIX community. So so these are typical things that maybe should frame our discussion after the presentation of STIX.
So if there is no urgent question, I propose that we move.
Maybe I have a
Yeah.
question.
Go ahead, Ronnie, go ahead.
Yeah, you mentioned there was like a version with a soybean, an orchidea crop, but were the later versions of Wu et al. So somehow it disappeared. Is it still possible to get the Orchidea Sticks version with soybean? Was it ever published in a paper or is it just in a thesis?
I think that the problem is that it was done, if I remember, in the first version. So we can have a look indeed to try to see which parameter we have used, but probably it will be not so easy because now we use a more. It was the old version of Sticks, and so now we have, we have a new version. But it's something that we can check together. I can try to find back this version and try to see if we can extract something that could be included in the.
Yeah, thanks. It would be helpful.
Yeah, okay. So see that.
Okay, so maybe we can move to the STIX
So there is some
presentation.
question in the chat.
The chat, yeah.
Ah, yeah, sorry.
Jean-Louis, which is INN?
It is a nitrogen nutrition index. It's a nitrogen stress, but
Okay.
I understood that there is no nitrogen in the orchid.
No, that's what I mentioned indeed in the initial version of Orchidea crop. We were not assuming to model INN, but that presently what we are aiming to with the work of Mojtaba, using I mean also the framework of the Orchidea version that now include the nitrogen cycle. So the idea would be to, let's say, define INN from the Orchidea framework that could be used in the computation of the AI within sticks.
Okay.
I don't know, Jean-Louis, if it answers entirely.
Parfaitement, yes,
Okay.
yes. Yes, it does. It's not done yet. You are
No, it's ongoing.
you are going to do it. So the sensitivity to nitrogen you showed
Was just
assuming you're not just playing with values,
a
but
parameter.
they are not
Yeah.
they are not simulated yet. Okay.
No, no, no.
Okay, fine.
And so there is a question from, I think it's more for Philippe, about the calibration of Orchidea.
Maybe I
Orchidas.
will. We have a system which is called Orchidas that is attached to Orchidea that propose different ways to optimize the cost function or minimize the cost function, playing on the parameters. Maybe I will give in the chat a link to. We have a web page that summarizes all the studies that we have done. There's 20 studies on that and the principle and so on. So I will put in the chat the links to the web page, and you're welcome to go through. And then if you have further, more precise questions, just ask me.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Okay. Is there other questions? So if no more questions, maybe, I don't know, Fabien, Julie, how you want to manage? The floor is yours. And
Yeah, I will start the presentation and then Fabien will conclude it. I'm gonna try to share my screen. Is this okay?
Yes,
Can you
fine.
see it? Okay, perfect. So I'm going to present you the stick soil crop model. I can change the slide. So first, a general presentation of sticks. So the mod. Sorry, I just. Okay. So it's a model to simulate the soil plant system and to understand its behavior. The idea of the model is to integrate lots of knowledge and test some hypotheses on its functioning. It can be used to predict the behavior and the change of the system for diagnoses such as stress, water stress, nitrogen stress, to estimate a potential yield, production loss due to abiotic stress. It can be used to help some public decision. Sorry, to assess the impact of climate change or to evaluate some alternative management, crop management or cropping system, and see the impact on agronomic and environmental variables. Sorry, I have some trouble to change the slide. Okay. So sorry, some parts are in French, but I will try to translate them. At the origin, the first meeting of sticks was some time ago, almost 30 years, and the idea was to have a unique model, sticks for different crop, and it should be able to integrate knowledge from specialists, from the soil, from the crops, from the climate, for instance, some more generalist, and to be generic, robust, simple. It became a bit more complex with time, operational and flexible. So it's a process-based model. It simulates the energy, water, nitrogen, and carbon balance at the field scale. And it could simulate it at the crop level or the cropping system level for 1 year or several years. The idea of the model is to be open source, collective and interdisciplinary. And we also develop a systematic evaluation of the model to ensure its robustness before distributing it to the users. So simulation in sticks, you have some global inputs called general parameters and some plant parameters. And you have some local inputs that are about the weather, the management, the soil, its permanent characteristics, and the initial value of some variables such as the soil water content in the soil, nitrogen in the soil, the carbon, the level of carbon in the soil, and so on. Then the model sticks with a daily time step. We simulate from sowing to harvest the crop growth, but it will also simulate the fallow period that follow or that is before the sowing. The output will be about a daily or cumulative output with agronomic variable such as production, nitrogen in grain, in plant, and so on, and some environmental variables such as nitrate leaching, N2 emission, water drainage, and carbon sequestration, for instance. And there is, of course, state variables of all processes that are simulated at each day. The model is built in modules that you can see on this slide. Some modules are around the crop with the phenology, the shoot growth, the root growth as well, the yield formation. You have some modules around the water cycle with irrigation, water demand, soil evaporation, plant respiration. Some around the microclimate with the crop and soil temperature. Some about nitrogen with fertilizer, organic manure, and uptake, symbiotic fixation, mineralization of soil organic matter, residue decomposition. And you also have, of course, the soil that is represented in the soil, in the model, with the roots in the soil and the water nitrate transfer in the soil. So each processes are simulated at the daily time step, and it's simulating interaction with crop management and also the daily weather. So STIX is parameterized for a large range of crops. So you have here the annual crop from cereals to legumes, oilseeds, and other crops. You also have some perennial crop with grasses such as ryegrass, miscanthus, legumes, perennial legumes such as alfalfa, and woody with wine and bananas, a bit more exotic. And then you have also some cover crops in the STIX model to simulate cropping system, such as Italian ryegrass, white mustard, vetch, and you can also simulate the bare soil. There's also the possibility to simulate some intercropping in the model with, for instance, wheat and soybean or other. Here is two examples of the generosity in the crop in the model. With you can choose different options to simulate a specific process. For instance, you have here grapevine, and the other one is wheat. And you can see that, for instance, for phenology, you can use some equation on cold requirement to deal with dormancy. For wine and for wheat, for instance, for phenology, it's the photoperiod that is activated and the vernalization. For the shoot growth, you can use a radiative transfer, or you can use a beer law that is much more simpler for homogeneous crop. And so on. For nitrogen transformation, you can choose to activate the symbiotic fixation with the leguminous option or not. So in this way, you can really calibrate a large range of crop in the model. You can also simulate a large range of crop management, depending on the crop you want to simulate and the cropping system. And here you have some option on the crop onset. You can sow a crop, you can plant it, you can start the bud breaking. You can also input some organic fertilization with different kind of residues. You can apply mineral fertilization with different types of fertilizers. You can do it on the surface or with ferti irrigation, for instance. We also have an option in the model to simulate irrigation. So you can choose the location of the irrigation above or below the foliage, for instance. And you can also activate an automatic option of irrigation that will depend on the water stress of the crop to trigger irrigation. You can have some shape control on the leaf area index for some crop with a cutting, leaf removal. You can decide to harvest the crop at a specific date or tell sticks you want to, oh sorry, it's at the bottom of the screen to harvest at the physiological maturity or at a certain percentage of water, and so on. I will not go into all this detail, but you can see you have a lot of options that you can use in the model. To go a little bit further on crop growth, soil and water and nitrogen carbon balances in the model. So the model uses an interception and conversion approach. So we have the interception of light with leaf area index. It's converted in biomass, in aerial biomass, and then they're partitioned to grain and fruits. So LAI and repartition will depend mainly on phenology. And first, the sticks will simulate a potential growth that will depend mainly on temperature, but also photoperiod, vernalization, and some other cold. And aerial biomass will depend mainly on radiation with a radiation use efficiency approach. Then you have the stress that will impact this potential growth with water stress, nitrogen stress on the different processes in the model. Sorry. Stuck. Okay. So the soil sticks it's a reservoir model that will represent several up to 5 layers of soil that is characterized by soil moisture content at field capacity, at wilting point, and bulk density. It's represented here on the graph with the red line. So they can have a different pedological layers. And then the model will calculate for each centimeter the water balance resolution and consider that nitrate is perfectly mixed in each centimetrical layer. So the water come with rain or irrigation. It will fill the first layer up to field capacity, and then it will go into the next and the next and the next and so on. And drainage will occur when all the soil is at field capacity, and the soil water content will diminish through evaporation and transpiration of the crop. So in the water balance, sticks takes into account rainfall, irrigation as input, and it will simulate transpiration, evaporation, runoff, and drainage. For evapotranspiration, sticks will, as for growth, it will calculate the potential and then an actual evapotranspiration. For potential, for evaporation and transpiration, it depends on the LAA and the potential evapotranspiration of the site of the day. And the more the LAA growth, the lower the potential evaporation will be, and the higher the potential transpiration will be using a crop coefficient approach. Then the model was calculated the actual evaporation that will depend on the last rain and some parameter from the soil, considering that the first after a rain evaporation will be at potential until a certain amount, and above this amount it will be less strong due to some soil water capacity to hold water. And then sticks will attribute the evaporation that is the water that is lost through evaporation in the soil profile with a larger contribution of the surface of the soil than the bottom. For transpiration, the model will take into account the soil water capacity, but only the one that is reached by the roots of the crop. And if there is enough water, the transpiration will be at the potential. Below a certain threshold, that depends on the crop, on the climate, on the rooting depth, on its density, and so on. It will be reduced, and this will create some water stress that will impact the photosynthesis, the crop growth, and some other processes. For the nitrogen balance, the model takes into account nitrogen that is input through rainfall, irrigation, mineral fertilizer, and its efficiency, crop residue, and organic fertilizer. It will simulate a crop exportation through yield or the whole crop if the whole crop is exported. The volatilization and denitrification and nitrate leaching for the output of nitrogen from the system. Within the system, the carbon and nitrogen transformation are represented. We have three organic matter pools: the residue, fresh residue, microbial pool, and the purified organic matter. And the model considers that there is a certain depth above which mineralization can occur, and it will simulate all these processes: decomposition, humidification, mineralization, organization, on this depth. It will also simulate denitrification on another layer that is a surface layer around 20 centimeters in general. And there is a potential rate for these processes that is modeled by substrate availability now in nitrogen and in carbon, and the climatic and soil conditions such as temperature, water content, aeration, pH, and so on. And I didn't say, but there is an organic part of nitrogen that I detailed, but there's also mineral part with ammonia and nitrate for the crop to uptake. So to deepen a little bit the explanation on carbon and nitrogen transformation in each soil, we have the fresh organic matter, and we can see at each transformation and degradation of this matter, we have CO2 emission. For this degradation, the microbial biomass will use nitrogen from the fresh crop residue if it has a low C under N ratio, but it could also organize the nitrogen, the mineral nitrogen for the soil, and create some stress for the next crop, for instance, if there is not enough nitrogen. So the fresh organic matter is simulated by the model. If you simulate yields and biomass, the model will know the crop residues have returned to the soil, or you can also put some exogenous organic matter in the model. And so we'll have some impact of global radiation, temperature, water and nitrogen limitation, and some management practices such as sowing, harvest date, seed intensity, and so on. For those two processes, from fresh matter to microbial and active soil organic carbon, the main factors will be the residue type and C/N ratio, the soil temperature, soil water content, and N limitation, as I explained a bit earlier in the soil. And for the mineralization of the soil organic matter, the humidified soil organic carbon, it depends on a mineralization rate that depend on pedoclimatic characteristics, soil temperature, soil water content, and the characteristic of the soil, such as clay content, soil pH, and so on. For nitrogen uptake by the crop, it's based on the dilution curve concept. So we estimate the demand of the crop with this curve that is the N content in the crop and is its biomass. So we have the demand and the critical curves that below this curve there will be some nitrogen stress. Then the model look at the offer from fertilizer, mineralization, nitrogen fixation, the amount of nitrate available in the soil, where there is some roots, and from this it will determine the nitrogen concentration. And if there is not enough nitrogen in the soil, we will have some nitrogen stress that will impact growth and phenology and yield. And then I will leave the floor to Fabien.
Okay, thank you, Julie. So I will show you some example of evaluation and applications of sticks. So next slide. Thank you. So we have a reference data set with a lot of sites in France and several about 15 crops, different crops and different management practices. And sorry. Okay, you can go back.
Sorry. Okay.
Yes. Okay. So it allows us to test the different versions of the model, and it was published in 2015, and we have several observed variables regarding crop biomass, crop yield, soil mineral nitrogen, soil water, and we can evaluate the ability of the model to simulate these different variables using different statistical criteria. And so we are working to enlarge this database with international data and also some long-term experiment, also to add, for example, soil organic carbon as other observed variables. Next slide. Regarding long-term simulation, this is an example of nitrogen budget simulated by sticks for different cropping systems in two long-term experiments, one in Switzerland and the other in Denmark, I think. It was in the PhD thesis of Benedict Autret. The model can simulate the evolution of the soil organic nitrogen carbon stock, but also nitrate leaching, nitrate volatilization, nitrate denitrification, and we can access some variable which were not directly measured in the field. Next slide. Another example, which is called ESOP. It is for it is a tool which is used by the Ministère de l'Agriculture to evaluate the grassland yield according to the weather of the year. So we have a database with the different soil, different climates with the whole French territory, and we have a reference period of 30 years, and we can compare the simulated yield for a given month and a given year with the reference period, and we can say, okay, this month there is no problem. For example, here in April, we have no water stress, so the yield would be higher than the mean, than the average. But for other period, starting here in June and all the summer, we will have problems with the grassland yields. Okay. Last example, it was for it is from the 4 per mil study, which was done by INRA and by a team with Julie. So STIX was used at the France scale to simulate different scenarios of cropping practices to evaluate the possibility to increase carbon storage in the soil. So using different information regarding the soil, the climate, and the cropping practices. And here you have an example of one of the scenarios regarding the use of cover crops. So we compared two scenarios, the baseline with the current practices, and an increase of the frequency of the cover crops, and we were able to evaluate the additional carbon storage using more cover crops. And last part, so regarding some ongoing works and prospects. So one recent work for the improvement of STIX was about intercrop. It was a work by Rémi Vézy, which was published last year. So Rémi updated and corrected some part of the model regarding for example, competition between plants, the calculation of the height of the plant, and he parameterized and evaluated different intercrop. So with, for example, pea, barley, wheat, pea, etc. And this will be included in the next standard version of STIX. So probably at this autumn, at the end of the year. Another ongoing work regarding soil organic carbon under grassland, which was done with Anne-Isabelle Gros. So we made some changes in the code to correct some bugs regarding grassland simulation, and we also improve the parameterization of the grassland using different grassland types, and also with an optimization of a few parameters regarding root dynamics on the grassland. This was done on some long-term experiments, including grassland. So this is an example with Soer ACBB Lusignan, with different treatments, including grassland with either 3-year, 6-year grassland or permanent grassland with mineral nitrogen or not, and who is grazing or not. And we can see that the model is able to represent the soil organic carbon dynamic and also the amount of root carbon for the different systems. And last example, it's about phosphorus. So we also have an ongoing work to include the phosphorus cycle in sticks. It is a PhD of Segweni. I forgot his first name. Sorry. So he worked on the implementation of different new modules to deal with phosphorus. So with different parts of the system regarding the soil, the crop demand, the absorption by the crop, and so on. And it is being tested with experimental data to evaluate this new version. And that's all. Thank you for your attention. You can have some more, yes, you can have more information looking at our website. And also we have a book which presents the main conceptual frameworks and equations of the STIX model. And you can also look at the collection in the French HAL, which gather all the papers using STIX.